You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, week 1!
It's here. Finally. God, we did it. Real football.
We survived another offseason.
Oh, man. This is a very joyous celebration. I feel like I'm going to bust it out.
Oh, man.
RIP to everyone using headphones.
It had to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm way too excited. Yeah, football's here, and we got to start off with Raider hate week, man. It doesn't feel good. It feels good to hate. You know, I know you're a man of preaching love and compassion, but when it comes to football rivalries, within reason, don't break any laws, but it's fun to hate, and God, do I hate the Raiders.
They make it easy to hate them.
Just trash.
I mean, and then, of course, you got Chucky as their coach.
I tell you what, man. Yeah, Spider 2-Eyed
Nathan
Banana.
Peterman.
He can throw just as good to the other team as his own team. He's helps everybody.
You can book us anytime you want for your comedy sketches.
Yeah, no, it's but we only take contracts that are 10 years, $100 million guaranteed, just like Gruden. So
That's right.
We'll be locked in, no matter what.
We aim high.
Yeah. God, his agent, man, hats off.
Well, you know, he's going to Vegas. They needed some kind of entertainer to be their coach, so it makes a lot of sense for them.
You know what's entertaining? Winning.
What's it? Well, yeah. But
Not
if you can't
sucking.
win, just have the craziest show on turf.
Well, you might as well bring in like Johnny Manziel and like Chad Kelly and Colin Kaepernick and bring back Randy Moss and just screw it. And who cares at that point? Start the circus music.
Oh, man. Fun times. Did you see the whole Johnny Manziel?
Oh, with Antonio Bryant?
Was that who? Okay, I was trying to figure out who it was all with, but yeah, that whole thing.
With the insurance thing? Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. And my dad's an insurance agent, and so I know all about different insurance agencies. They are a terrible agency. Oh, my gosh. But I won't get into that. That's here and there. But we're here to talk some football, some real football. And very, very excited to break down this week 1 matchup. So we're going to be talking about this all week. Make sure that you're following us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course, Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated, and know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football fans, listen up. Do you want to join the biggest NFL season-long tournament ever? Of course you do. If you love fantasy football, and we know you do, then you need to enter the $3.5 million Best Ball Championship on draft. That's right, $3.5 million in real, cold, hard cash. It's huge. It's a season-long tournament, but with no management. You just set it and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire. You don't even have to set your lineup. Your best players get automatically started, and you'll get the best score every week, guaranteed. For a limited time only, you can get a free entry into the Best Ball Championship when you make your first deposit, but you have to use our promo code HUDDLE. That's right, a free shot at $1 million just by using the promo code HUDDLE when you make your first deposit on Draft. Just search Draft in the App Store or go to draft.com and come play for free. Oh, don't forget to use that promo code HUDDLE.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, Carl. Well, we are back, and you know what that means? It's time for a fresh and really just feels like the first, as much fun as we tried to make preseason. This is real. This is the real stuff. So I want to say, dub it. This is the first official Scouts Eye preview of the 2019 season. We're back.
Oh man, very, very excited. It's these are always fun to get ready for, just because it's exactly what we love to do. Watch tape, watch teams, see what they bring to the field, what's their strengths, what's their weaknesses, what's the Broncos' strengths, what's their weaknesses, all that kind of stuff. And it's just exciting, especially having the new coach, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. There's just so much new for the Broncos this year. And so lots to be excited about, and no better team to start a season with than the Raiders for sure.
Yep, absolutely hate them, and a game that's winnable for the Broncos as well. So that's a big thing. Starting off the season on that win doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, I always
Hopefully.
think well, yeah, you always hope so. It's kind of like in high school football, just because that's getting ready to start up around here. And I always think like homecoming week, you always want to have it against your easiest opponent. So you got that nice win, get to go to the dance, celebrate, all those kind of things. For the Broncos, like you said, this is one of the easier games on the schedule. So hopefully we're celebrating next week when we come back on this podcast and get an opportunity to say Broncos are undefeated in the Vic Fangio era.
That would be great to start off 1-0. However, I do think the past few seasons, the Broncos have started off hot. Whether it be Vance Joseph, I think they even started off 6-0 under Josh McDaniels, if my memory serves me right. So 1 week at a time, folks. But getting that first win, I mean, they really need it considering how the schedule sets up. And playing at Oakland, last time the Broncos will be going to Oakland, probably. Who knows? Maybe they'll push it off another year. Gosh, what a cluster this has all been for them. But yeah, it's definitely a must-win game for the Broncos.
For sure. Now, before we get to the actual game, since we are about the building the roster, and the Broncos have their final 53, it looks like, heading into this first game, I did want to take a step back just real quick that we can go through this and kind of just break down the 53-man roster, just decisions we liked, decisions we didn't like. So 2 decisions that we liked, 1 decision that we didn't. And so, Nick, what's your first thing that you really liked that the Broncos did when designing this 53-man roster?
Well, I like that they did keep the athletic and special teams upside of Joseph Jones. I know that he didn't get much of a chance this season, got an injury in that Hall of Fame game, but I feel like there was a good amount of upside with his game, and even if he just becomes a good special teams player, they need that. So I'm really glad that they didn't give up on him. Probably the most athletic player the Broncos have in that linebacker core, and still pretty young and improving. So I'm glad that he's still on there despite missing so much time, and hopefully we will get him back this season, and maybe he'll push a guy like Josie Jewell or Todd Davis. And in the worst case, we have another athletic guy that might be able to go out there in sub packages and be good in special teams. But I'm glad Joseph Jones is still here.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's a good sign that at his injury, he could be back sooner than later. So that's always nice. My first like that I saw with this was the trade for Duke Dawson. And it surprised me how many people were down on this of, why are you trading for a cornerback when we have all these other positions of need? Well, just because they're a position of need doesn't mean that you just ignore all the positions too. And I thought Duke Dawson, I remember him coming out, really liked his game, I think he's a great fit in the Fangio scheme. And on top of that, he is also great for special teams. That's another big key thing. I think a lot of the moves the Broncos made for the 53-man roster, some of the guys that they brought in, I mean, obviously the punt returner, Deontay Spencer, I think you're going to talk about him here a little bit, but I mean, just a lot of things to improve special teams, and Duke Dawson, I think, is one of those moves. Liked it. I mean, when you're trading a 6th-round pick for a 7th-round pick and a player with some upside, I'll take it every day.
Yep, I do not disagree with you one bit. And the next, I guess we now are on to a dislike. For me, it's really just the fact that it sounds like Locke is going to be getting a redshirt season from a physical standpoint on the injured reserve. And that sucks. I mean, there's some mental and growth that he can have from the IR, but it's going to limit his reps. It's going to limit some stuff with him, and it's going to limit the possibility that if this season goes down the toilet, which is a possibility because the schedule is really rough and the division is rough, and the way the schedule sets up too, they have probably the easiest 2 games of the entire year are week 16 and 17. That means we won't get a chance to see him. And that's just a disappointment for me because obviously we've harped on it on here. You have to have that quarterback, otherwise you're going nowhere fast. So, Locke done for the season. It sounds like that's a disappointment.
For sure. Well, mine is bringing back Keyshawn Bierria, I thought there were other linebackers on the roster that showed a little bit more, and I just don't think he has high upside on special teams. I don't think he has high upside on the defense. I was just a little shocked that they brought him back. And so probably the one real move that really had me scratching my head.
Yeah, nope, you're correct there. Then my final positive thing, heading in the right direction for me, I really like the Deontay Spencer as a returner. He's 27 years old. He's probably not going to be a guy that gets much play in the offense, although we'll see with Scangarello. Hard to say considering we got no look at him on this Broncos team in preseason. But the fact that they have an upside returner there, even just taking a flyer in that regard is gigantic. So, man, I'm hoping for the best there, and again, taking that shot is a big get for me. So excited to see if he can bring anything. I thought he looked pretty good for the Steelers there, and man, if he can bust one off here week 1 against the Raiders, man, that would be something.
Well, I went back and watched him for the preseason, and as a punt returner, he is, I think 70% of his punt returns went longer than any of the Broncos had the entire preseason. So, right there, you're just looking at a guy that knows what to do, has a little bit more speed to his game. I will say, as a receiver, I was not very impressed with him. Didn't have the best hands. Kind of looked like more of a body catcher than an actual natural hands catcher. Not always the crispest.
The most precise.
Yeah, not the most precise routes watching him run. They did do an end around with him, which I think went for like 20 yards. And so you could see some of those things definitely mixed in there, making a team have to respect that he could take one around the edge. That's something that the Chiefs have loved to use. I know a lot of coaches have talked about that. That's been one of the biggest changes in the NFL over the last couple of years is teams using those jet sweep plays. So he's a nice piece to have for that. So I definitely love that move. I can't disagree with it one bit. He's very consistent. I think, what was it, the last 4 years he's played in the CFL?
I think so, yes.
And, he's had close to 100 punt returns, if I remember right. And so this guy has a lot of experience, very good hands, knows what he's doing back there. It's exactly what the Broncos needed to add to their special teams, just to give him something. With most of the guys, we were worried about whether they would even catch the football. So at least he can do that, and he looks like a guy that has a little bit more burn to his game. So I'm excited about that. But my second I really like the decision to move on from Hogan and Rippon. I know they brought Rippon back, so that's great. He's got some upside as a backup. No issue there. But neither Hogan nor Rippon had earned a roster spot. If Hogan got the job, it would just be because they just felt like keeping the veteran and didn't feel like there was anything on the waiver wire to go pick up. Now, I'm not exactly excited about the guy they picked up either.
He looked okay against the Broncos.
He did. I'm not saying that he's not. He's looked better than what Hogan and Rippon have put together. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
But I was just excited that I know a lot of people are going, oh, they got to keep Hogan. Well, the great thing about the NFL right now, especially with what the Broncos have with Scangarello, is about, 40% of the NFL teams run pretty similar systems to what the Broncos are running. And so it's not this crazy idea that you can't just bring in somebody from another team like the Rams who are running pretty much the exact same system, or at least 95% the same system. So it's not as crazy today as maybe years past for a player to come in and be able to be ready for week 1.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So yeah, that will be interesting for the Broncos as well. Obviously, I think they did get Rippon on the practice squad, so that's nice. Will he be much of anything? Didn't show much in preseason, so happy that they are moving on there from those guys. And, if Joe Flacco goes down, the season's pretty much over anyway. So Brandon Allen, young guy, showed a little bit. Playing in a system similar to this, I don't mind it. But, this is like we talked about before. It's not a deep roster right now, and Flacco's one of those guys. Even if he is a average starting quarterback in this league, maybe even a little lower, like a C-, that's still a starting quarterback. So if he goes down, it's probably pretty much over anyway. It's a fact Refinancing your credit card balances can lower your interest rate and save you money, and you don't have to be a financial expert to do it. Right now, you can get a credit card consolidation loan from my friends at Lightstream with a rate as low as 5.95 APR with autopay, lower than the average credit card interest rate of over 19% APR. That means you could save thousands of dollars on interest. Get a loan from $5,000 to $100,000. Just for my listeners, apply now to get a special interest rate discount. The only way to get this discount is to go through lightstream.com/huddleup. That's lightstream.com/huddleup. Subject to credit approval. Rate includes a 0.5% auto pay discount. Terms and conditions apply and offers are subject to change without notice. Visit lightstream.com/huddleup for more information.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and welcome back to Building the Broncos. And of course, we are back with our preview episodes heading into each week. And of course, starting with week 1, Monday Night Football, and Broncos at Oakland. And maybe the last time we say that, at Oakland. I hate their field. I think most players hate their field. So this is a good thing that they might be moving to a great stadium in Las Vegas. Sorry, I don't want to add another team to LA here. But I just want to start off here. Let's just look at maybe some of the changes here that Oakland's made over the offseason. They've done a lot for sure. And it starts with their wide receiver core. Last year started off with Amari Cooper and Jordy Nelson as their 1-2 punch. This year, obviously, Antonio Brown and Tyrell Williams. Now, has Antonio Brown got his whole helmet thing figured out?
Yeah, apparently he does, but
okay.
It's still been a major distraction, so we'll see.
And then, of course, his feet. We'll see how well they have healed up. It sounds like they should be okay to go. I know he's still having a little bit of trouble cutting on them. But then, of course, the signing also of Tyrell Williams from the Chargers and adding a nice big weapon there that's given the Broncos some trouble at different times. And then they added 2 new pieces to their offensive line, got rid of Osemele, and added, Jonathan Cooper is going to be the one that starts this one at left guard. And then, of course, the signing of Trent Brown to the largest right tackle deal in NFL history. And then at running back, big change there, going from Marshawn Lynch to start the season last year to first-round pick Josh Jacobs this year. So anything stick out there at the offense for you?
Well, for me, it's got to be this wide receiver depth chart for the Raiders, right? Like, they had solid ones last year. I mean, Amari Cooper is about to get absolutely paid, but bringing in Antonio Brown with everything he's done, I mean, he's been one of the best wide receivers in football over the last decade, and his ability to play the slot as well is something that really going to be interesting for the Broncos in this new scheme to see if it's Chris Harris Jr. following him around, Bryce Callahan, et cetera, et cetera. But they also made some moves. I mean, I'd argue 1 through 4 for the Raiders wide receiver depth chart is different. They paid Tyrell Williams, who is a big athlete from the Chargers this offseason, to be technically their wide receiver too. And he has a chance to break out. He's really got some interesting tools, the athleticism and the size. And then they brought in Hunter Renfrow. People remember him calling in that game-winning touchdown catch for Clemson versus Alabama 2 seasons ago. No, not the best athlete, tiny hands, but man, he is a great route runner and been shown decent ability to catch the ball from the slot. So probably kind of that prototypical Bill Belichick small white guy playing slot. And then they also brought in J.J. Nelson. And he has some legitimate speed out there, playing for that Bruce Arians system in Arizona where he had his best football. So, yeah, this Raiders wide receiver group has completely been changed, but I feel like they have as good of depth that they've had there in quite some time. So real talent there. And then, not only on top of that, but Josh Jacobs is a really good receiving back as well. So they have some weapons for Carr that they haven't had in the past few seasons.
All right, well, switching over to the defensive side, they, of course, added their 4th overall pick, Clellin Ferrell, and added Jonathan Hankins, a guy that the Broncos were interested there for the defensive line to help in the run game. And, of course, added controversial player Vontaze Burfict, and we'll see what he can bring to the roster. But then, of course, another couple draft picks. They really added a lot to their defense on the draft. Jonathan Abram, one of the hardest-hitting safeties in the entire draft. And then Trayvon Mullen, very big cornerback that, they showed that they were scouting Clemson for sure. They liked them Clemson players. And I mean, why not? I mean, they just won the national championship, so they have to have some talent on that defense. But anything stick out from the defense for you?
Well, for me, I mean, I feel like this is not a great defense. Let's put it very easily. They've done stuff to solidify this offensive line, and they've used 2 first-round picks to bring in some defensive talent. But I think this front 7 is still really not very good. The second level, the linebackers are slow. I mean, we complain about the Broncos linebackers a lot, but really the linebacker core of every single one of the teams in the AFC West looks to be below average unless some relative unknowns come out of nowhere. Looking at the Chargers with the youth they have at linebacker, but the Raiders, it's not good. So that front 7, I do like some of that talent on the defensive line. They brought back Jonathan Hankins, who's a really good run stuffer. They have Mo Hurst, who some people thought would be a first-round pick. He had a heart condition that was shown, flashed last season. Clellin, Ferrell, and Arden Key. But really, this front 7 is just... it's more potential than anything proven right now. It's really not a good unit, and this Raiders defense just does not impress me at all. I mean, I do like J.J. Abrams, but he's kind of more of that thumper. How is he going to cover in today's game? Just a solid athlete, physical, smart, everything like that. He's going to be a prototypical Raider. You're going to love to hate him. I think he's going to have probably some personal fouls in this game and this season, maybe. That's just kind of the guy he is.
Have you watched Hard Knocks at all? I think I've asked you this before.
I have not. Nope, I have not. I know that he's a big personality, though.
He is. And they got after him quite a few times in practice that he's just not being smart.
Yeah, he plays dumb, out of control.
Right. And, I mean, players like that, it's hard for them to tone it back. I mean, you bring them in because they set the tone, but you also have to be prepared for the stupidity, for sure. Yeah.
Tone setter, but that can also cost you 15 yards and a lot of money out of their pocket. So We'll see. The biggest thing for me, I really, really like Garyon Conley, who kind of had a slow start to his career in Oakland, but looked really good down the stretch last season. First-round pick, 2017. But behind him, it's really bad. Their cornerback depth is some of the worst in the league. I mean, Darryl Worley, Trayvon Mullen, Keyshawn Nixon. It's bad. It's really not good. I mean, LaMarcus Joyner can kind of do a little bit of safety / nickel stuff as well, although a teeny tiny little guy there.
Right.
But I just, it's not, I'm really not impressed with this defense. There's some high picks there, but they need these guys to hit and contribute fast if this defense is going to even be,
average.
I mean, maybe even average, just so they're not bottom 10.
Right.
So it's not a great defense.
Right. And so, I mean, that was going to be kind of our next talk here, a little bit of just looking at what's the biggest area of improvement for this roster. What's the biggest area of maybe lost talent, because every team kind of goes in spurts of where they're strong, where they're weak. And I will say the Raiders last year, I mean, it was obvious they're a team in transition. I think they're in another year of transition just because they had so little talent on the roster. But I will say, looking at them top to bottom compared to last year, I do see more depth than last year. Now, that's not saying much, just, again, because they were pretty terrible last year. But I'm looking at some guys that were starters last year that are now actually backups this year. I'm thinking of like Arden Key. He had to start there for quite a while. Maurice Hurst is another one that, I mean, kind of depending on what they do with PJ Hall, Hankins. I mean, he's going to be kind of a pseudo starter, I guess you could say. But then, like you said, wide receiver depth looks pretty good. Maybe other positions. I don't know. They kind of flowed both ways. And then the area that I think that they've really taken a step back, tight end.
Yeah.
I mean, Jared Cook last year, one of the best receiving tight ends in all of football. Almost 900 yards receiving. Was really the main go-to weapon for Derek Carr. I mean, you think about, they traded Amari Cooper halfway through the year, so that doesn't help. And then I think about Jordy Nelson. I mean, he was a shell of himself. And so it really came down to he had Jared Cook, and that's about it. And so then when you lose that kind of talent, it'll be interesting to see how they switch over on that tight end position this year. They did add rookie Foster Moreau, which I know you were really high on him.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a solid tight end too. And apparently he's done pretty well down there. So
but
we'll see. He's
again,
more of a blocker.
Right. And like I said, I mean, they're going from one of the best receiving tight ends to now not much there.
Yeah. Well, unless you ask Derek Carr, who had the Raiders tight end as one of the best in football this season, Darren Waller, who is a converted wide receiver. Maybe there is some upside there, but to have him as a top 10 tight end in the NFL. Did I say Derek Carr? It was his brother David Carr on NFL.com had a list.
Oh,
yeah, so maybe there's a little bias there. I don't know. God, I hate homerism. I really despise. That's probably one reason some people think I'm pessimistic. I just cannot stand homerism.
I understand. There's a couple guys out there for the NFL Network, especially that it shows up big time. ESPN has it too. I remember, who was that linebacker that always would be drooling if he talked about the Patriots?
Was it Teddy Bruschi?
Yes.
He's not as bad as the worst ever, and he won't listen to this podcast, so I don't care, but I absolutely despised Heath Evans, who was a fullback for the Patriots all those years, and he definitely had roid rage moments where he'd freak out on Twitter over people. And his head was so far up Tom Brady's rear end constantly that I called him the hemorrhoid, because he might as well just live there. It'd just be a bump in Tom Brady's anus. Yeah. So anyway, we probably should get back to being a little jaded. There was our PG-13 moment.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well,
I hate Heath Evans.
Where's your biggest area of improvement, and where have they maybe lost talent compared to last year?
Improvement, I already touched on it, but I really think that, especially the end of the season for them, but wide receiver has improved tremendously. Amari Cooper is a guy that I don't understand why it didn't work there. He looked incredible for the Cowboys there at the end, but I mean, the top four that they brought in, I'm pretty, I wouldn't want to say excited. That's the wrong word, but they have talent there. I mean, they have Ryan Grant as well, who's an interesting one. So really interesting there as well. And for the lost talent, it's got to be the interior offensive line. You got guys like Osemele, who's going to be gone now. They brought in Cooper. I mean, Incognito. I think this interior offensive line. Gabe Jackson, some injury as well. So I know they just signed Rodney Hudson, solid player. But I feel like it's just trending in the wrong direction from age and talent. And that's been such an important part of their roster structure. So that interior offensive line, big rating there. However, we're talking about a team that's been consistently terrible. So it's kind of hard to say where they've gotten that much worse. They were already pretty bad. Right.
There was only one way to go for them. And especially having as many draft picks as they had, I mean, it was pretty obvious they were going to get young and add some talent to them. But now getting to the actual game, just thinking about last year, Broncos went 1-1 against the Raiders. They beat them early in the season 20-19, and then lost later 27-14. Now, do you remember that first game, that 20-19 game?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that was one of the crazier games because it was when Derek Carr went 29 of 32. Something that's just unheard of. And all he did was pretty much just throw screens and quick passes because the Broncos were playing off coverage, just giving that cushion, not wanting to get beat over the top, pretty much playing not to lose. And somehow they did actually come out with a win. But I just remember that was one of the most frustrating games to watch with that defense.
Yeah, you are correct. I mean, they just kept giving up play after play, so it's going to be interesting to see if that changes this year with this scheme. I mean, I am okay with a little bit of bend don't break, depending on where your talent's at, because I'd rather have that opposing team march the ball down the field 15, 20 plays than give up an 80-yard pass for a touchdown, right? If you have to really earn that kind of offensive drive, which, I mean, they've shown if you have a patient quarterback, you can do that, but hopefully they'll be a little bit more aggressive this season, not play that off man so much and get continuously burnt, especially with the weapons that this Raiders offense has added. I mean, lost Jared Cook, yes, but I think the pass game weapons are definitely a step in the right direction.
Right. And so that was going to be my first question here, because I want to take on Broncos defense versus Raiders offense, and then, of course, switch to the other side. But have the Broncos added enough on defense to counter the Raiders doing that again?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is you got to have the confusion for Derek Carr, right? Like last season, I think the reads were pretty simple, stupid, and he took what they gave him, and then only like 2 incompletions, like you said. So you got to be a little bit more physical there. You got to trust your guys, and hopefully those zone coverages aren't as easy to read for him as the simple off-man, match him up defense that we saw last year from the Broncos. Granted, Fangio still plays some man. Like I think he played 10th highest rate last season, but he does a good job of mixing in that back end. It's not that classic single high safety, and here everybody else is manning up with maybe a guy playing hook zone over the middle. No, much more complicated, and hopefully that section of confusion, whether it be the coverages or the pressure, will do enough to throw Derek Carr off a bit, who's been trending in the wrong direction since his great season.
Right. Well, and that's one thing I really like just watching the Bears last year, and something that I think the Broncos can do a lot of this year is, a lot of teams will do that pre-snap movement just to see, as a team in man, are they in zone? And just because the Broncos have good corners in slot, outside, they got the safeties that can cover. I mean, a lot of those guys can actually stay put and not give away, are we in man, are we in zone? And so I think that's something, again, that can really play into this kind of game where Derek Carr, other than his one really good season where he had an absolutely great offensive line, if you look at just his ability to, or his air yards, he's been one of the lowest in the entire NFL. He's a guy that doesn't like to get hit. He's a guy that likes to get the ball out of his hand as quick as possible. And when you got this zone coverage, that is one thing that can set up for a lot of turnovers. Guys taking their chance, jumping some routes. I do think that this could work out well for the Broncos and getting a couple turnovers early in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the middle of the field defense for the Broncos has to be better this season than we've seen it. And Todd Davis being injured, Josie Jewell's limitations. Antonio Brown's a slot guy. They have the tight end that is one of the Carr's favorites. We'll find out if it's both of them soon enough, I guess. And Jacobs. So the linebackers and the safety in that middle of the field coverage it's going to be huge. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's going to be a pretty big test right away, especially considering Gruden's quick West Coast offense.
For sure. Now, just thinking of their biggest weapon, though, Antonio Brown, how would you cover him? What would you do special to pretty much say, we're not going to let this guy beat the Broncos?
Well, first I'd bring back some cryogenic freezers on the field.
Of course.
11 of them lined up against him. And no, I think the biggest thing is you got to get physical with him. And honestly, I'm trying to get into his head a little bit. You're not stable. You're not coming off as stable. Operating at a different plane than everybody else right now, if you will. So I'm going to be, being a little physical to him, push him up a little bit, and that's a double-edged sword. Maybe he goes off because of that, but I think more likely he's going to kind of just lose it, right? So I'm trying to be physical with him, and I'd put Chris Harris Jr. on him a fair amount, but I'm switching it up as well. Callahan is another one that I think, welcome to the Broncos, man. We haven't seen much of you, but here's Antonio Brown. So it'll depend on everything, and you don't really neutralize a guy like Antonio Brown, really. But big thing, like I talked about earlier, physical with him, obviously, get in his head if you can, but don't let the big plays happen. If he's going to catch the ball underneath, you got to have sure tackling. Don't fall for the double move. If they're going to march down the field, they got to earn it. So those are the big things for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I can't disagree with any of that. But like you said, that safety and linebacker group, this is going to be a big game for them. And then the other big thing for me is just looking at Bradley Chubb. I mean, this game sets up so well for him to go out there and have a good game. Going against Colton Miller, one of the worst tackles probably in the last about 2-3 years, and that's saying something.
Yeah.
And so he's got to go out there and win his matchup because, I mean, as much as I love Von Miller, and I do think he wins his matchup against Trent Brown, that's still a much, much tougher matchup for sure.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. That's a big thing. So, we'll see. That'll be a big one.
All right. Well, let's switch to the other side here. And I guess what position group on defense would you try to attack? Just looking at the weapons the Broncos have and the personnel of the and the personnel of the Raiders.
Well, you almost started saying it.
I know. I'm sorry. Just because it's on my mind, man. I love when you can attack linebackers.
That's the biggest disadvantage in football, a linebacker in space. There's not many guys that can do the 3-down stuff, and if you can pick on them, tight end, slot receiver, running back, take advantage of it. And this Raiders linebacker group is trash. Burfict is old. I mean, I'm not excited about these other guys, and we'll see about the likes of Joyner, Abrams, and Carl Joseph there for the safeties. But hopefully Fant, welcome to the NFL moment. 20 catches, 5,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Noah Fant. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that using those guys, and especially the running backs, getting those guys in the middle of the field passing game, really working that quick passing game, the bootlegs, everything like that, and putting those linebackers in stressful situations is the area that I'm really looking to attack. And also, I'm looking for the run game to be solid. I mean, Clellin Ferrell's a good one. So is Hankins as far as run defense, but the linebackers are not great. So the front seven is a big one for me. But like I said, this Raiders defense on paper, not good. So the Broncos should have a chance to have the offense look okay this week. So that's something to look forward to.
Well, and Fangio did say when talking about this upcoming matchup that Fant will be out there a lot. And said that he plans on some of the targets definitely going his way. So it's going to be, I think they see the same weakness. I think they see an opportunity for Hireman, for Hamilton, for Fant, all those guys to really have some opportunities to get in there. And of course, Fant, I'm excited just to watch him block because, I mean, that's the big thing you want to see is a two-way tight end, guy that can block, guy that can receive. And I think Fant can really turn into that. And so I think that'll be big for just keeping teams guessing this year of what he's in there for. And so, I mean, it's definitely the easiest place for the Broncos to attack. I mean, like you've already said, Gary Conley, he had a pretty solid season last year. Very underrated considering, I mean, the Raiders were just a terrible team, but he was actually a very, very good player. Very impressed with him. And, I mean, so that'll be an interesting matchup, just seeing him and Sanders go against each other one-on-one. I think that'll be where he probably spends a lot of his time. But beyond that, is there any other place that you're looking for this offense? Are you looking for some deep shots early in the game?
I want to get that run game going and use a lot of play action to get those linebackers in bad spots, maybe over-aggressiveness from a guy like Abram if he's out there, and look to hit those weak spots in between the first and second level of the defense and the second and the third. And I got some matchups to watch as well that I would like to attack if I'm the Broncos.
All right, well, what are those matchups for you?
Well, for me, the big matchups, I have a few here. Obviously, you touched on one a little bit. Colton Miller versus Bradley Chubb. Having Trent Brown on the opposite side should allow the Raiders to at least slide some protection, give some help on that side. But if Colton Miller is anything like he was last season, and it's a Tom Cable coached offensive line, it's very possible. Bradley Chubb has a chance to start off the season very strong. Maybe even a multi-sack game. I mean, you never know. Even if you get to one sack, that's great. But that's a matchup the Broncos should have a huge advantage on. I really am worried about Josh Jacobs versus the Broncos linebackers. He's shown not only as a good runner, but he's a good receiver, and man, that's been an issue for the Broncos. Everyone likes to talk about tight ends, but those running backs are just as worrisome over that short kind of area, and the Broncos don't really have much athleticism they're starting right now. And then for the Broncos, wide receiver, whichever wide receiver is going up against, not Garyon Conley, throw the guy that ball. I mean, obviously Conley isn't a total lockdown corner that you're looking to avoid, but those other guys are so unimpressive that you should have some matchups on the boundary or in the slot where you can really attack some of those areas, because Garyon Conley is pretty much the only cornerback that I respect at all for that Raiders secondary.
For sure. Well, a couple matchups. I mean, I'm looking at the other side, Von Miller versus Trent Brown.
Strength for strength.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I think Von Miller is the better player of those two by far, but it's still going to be, if Trent Brown can shut down Von Miller, it helps their offense so much that they don't have to continue to offer help on both sides of the tackles. And then, of course, Clellin Ferrell, his first game going against Garrett Bowles. I mean, you got a guy with high promise in Clellin Ferrell coming into the league as a rookie. Garrett Bowles, what's he going to show year 3 in the league? Is he going to actually start making some improvements? The team keeps saying Bowles is showing lots of improvement, but then you get to the games and you still see some of the same things that he's done in the past. So this will be a big one for him that the Broncos need him to win that matchup. And then, of course,
talk is cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the secondary versus Antonio Brown. I mean, he's one of the best 5 receivers in the NFL? If he's fully healthy?
Yeah, 5. Definitely.
And so, I mean, if you can shut him down, it really makes things so much easier for the entire defense. And finally, just because, I mean, this is one of the better returners in all of football. Dwayne Harris versus the coverage units. He's their punt and kickoff returner. And last year, I think he had a 99-yard kickoff return against the Broncos, or was it a punt return? I can't remember which one it was.
I don't remember. I remember him running ragged.
Right, exactly. I mean, and so just, you can't have that. I mean, I don't care if the special teams unit doesn't show anything great, but you can't give up something like that. I mean, that's a game changer right there, obviously. And so just want to see how they can handle, I mean, one of the better returners in all of football, week 1.
That'll be a big one. Their coverage units have not been good, so definitely a little bit of worry there, right? Like we've talked about special teams, it's obviously the least given credit unit in the football game, whether that be, offense, defense, special teams, but that can make or break a game. And if the Broncos special teams sucks, that could lose them the game. They have to be perfect on offense and defense then, and that's almost too much to ask.
Right. Well, and I think about, like, for the Broncos, the pieces that they added, again, just Duke Dawson added to the roster, Devontae Harris. I mean, both of them are supposed to be known for special teams, but they've had a week of practice before this game. So how much are they going to be day one? Corey Nelson's another one. I mean, are they going to be able to step in day one and be a true contributor, or is it going to be mass confusion? I mean, that's always the biggest worry when you bring in new guys right before the season. How much can they contribute day one? How much can they really be disciplined to do their job and not try to do more? And I mean, I like all those three. And I think as the season goes on, I think special teams will improve because, again, those three are much better than what the Broncos have shown all preseason. But just early on, that's when you start seeing some of those big mistakes, those mental errors that get cleaned up as the season goes.
That makes total sense to me. I'm totally with you there. All right, well, you don't have that section on here, but Carl, I got to ask you, who wins this game? What's the score?
Well, I have the Broncos winning this one. I think defensively they line up pretty well against this Raiders team. I think that they can get to Derek Carr. I think they can make him cringe a little bit there, worry about who's coming around the corner. And offensively, I think that they, again, match up pretty well. I think they can get the run game going plenty. I think they can get at least enough in the passing game to be successful. And so I have the Broncos winning this one 24-14.
Alrighty, and I'm with you there. I think the Broncos do end up winning this one. I'm going to go with the Broncos winning 27-24. I think it'll be a little more high scoring than people think. I think the Broncos, there's some little bit of familiarity there between these two teams, obviously, but I think the Raiders are a 1-point favorite as well. So that means in a neutral site, given what I know about sports betting, that would put the Broncos at a 2-point favorite on our neutral site. So Broncos, slightly better team. Raiders getting the home edge here. Monday night, the late Monday night game. But last time I remember the Broncos going into late Monday night against the Raiders, Eddie Royal, the rookie, and Jay Cutler absolutely pooped on the Raiders. I think that's that year. I remember that being a late Monday night game.
Yeah.
So, yep, I got the Broncos winning 27-24. I think they'll come out on top and start the season off 1-0, which they really need to. And your MVP of the game will be?
I think it's going to be Bradley Chubb. I mean, that seems to be a pretty easy choice, but just especially you look at his matchup, Colton Miller, terrible left tackle. I don't think he's improved all that much, especially you already mentioned his offensive line coach is known for not being a great offensive line coach. And so I think this is just one of those games that's set up so well for him to say, I'm here to stay NFL. I mean, I think he could really get his name into that superstardom list. What about you?
For me, I'm going to go with Phillip Lindsay. I think Lindsay's going to have a big game. I think that he's going to run pretty well. I think he's also going to have a couple catches that go for some big yardage. So if he can if the offensive line can get him to that second level, could be gone. So I think that's going to be I think he's going to have a big game. And he runs so hard. I'm just excited to see him running in this offensive line, just seeing what they look like. So I'm going to go with Phillip Lindsay. I feel like that's probably the safest bet too. maybe. But you know what? We're not playing the odds, so I'm going to go with the safest bet there. Philip Lindsay. And we will be right back on Building the Broncos to talk with special guest Andre Simone to go over Dane Brugler's Top 50 Big Board covering the 2020 draft prospects. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nicholas Kendell, and joined by today's special guest from BSN Denver, Andre Simone. Andre does a majority of the draft work for the Broncos coverage at BSN and has been a pretty good friend of mine here for the past, 2 years now.
Crazy. Well, the way we know is it goes back to the DeMarcus Walker pick. That's when you reached out and said I appreciated you keeping it real on DW over there. So yeah, that's where our bond developed. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks a little bit better in camp and whatnot. Maybe he'll have a role. I mean, for being a mid-second round pick, you hope for more than a rotational defensive lineman. But, you know, that's better than him being waived here, which is pretty much a majority of the entire 2017 class. So what can you do?
Right. He's at least better than most of the 2017 class. Yeah, slowly getting there. They need him. I mean, they need that depth. And yet he still looks a step too slow to me on just about everything he does. But I know that's not what you want to talk about, so I won't take us down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So today we are going to actually go over one of my favorite draft analysts' pieces, Dane Brugler over at The Athletic. His top 50. Andre has not seen it yet, so I'm going to go backwards from 50 to 1 and just kind of go over some of these lists here. I'll probably break it down 5 by 5 as we unveil it.
Cool.
And just kind of give some reactions there and some thoughts. Obviously, this was released before there'd been before real college football, not preseason. We're done with that now, thank God. Thank God. Ugh. Yeah, too long, too rough. But 50 guys here, and we'll try to keep it 30 minutes for you guys. But who knows? We're playing it by ear here. You know, good podcast is like jazz music. You just kind of go with where it takes you.
Absolutely.
So starting off here, 50th overall linebacker from Oregon, Troy Dye. 49th overall. Yes, interesting pick there. 49th overall. Yeah. Offensive tackle from Iowa, 6'7", 295 pounds, Alaric Jackson. Number 48 overall, Raekwon Davis, defensive lineman from Alabama. Number 47 overall, wide receiver from Oklahoma State, Taylon Wallace. Number 46 overall, running back from Wisconsin, Jonathan Taylor. And number 45 overall, tight end / wide receiver from Oklahoma, Grant Calcaterra. Andre, I'll kick it over to you. Okay. Does any of these guys really stand out? And obviously, Denver Broncos podcast, so literally every single one of these guys could be, I guess maybe besides Jonathan Taylor, I think could be an option for the Broncos. But, just general thoughts on these guys. Anybody particular stand out to you?
Completely agree. Troy Dye and Calcaterra in that same exact range for me. Probably the biggest difference would come down to Raekwon Davis, who I can get why you'd rank him lower there, why Dane would. Let's get that clear. But at the same time, I like Raekwon significantly more. He's within my top 20, so there's a big divergence there.
I think the big difference where I can see that coming from would be more so just what is the pass rushing upside with Raekwon Davis? You have the size there. He's obviously great at the point of attack, and he can take up multiple blockers. I mean, he's 6'6", 315 pounds, what they have listed here. But that first step and that penetration ability, I'm not sure it's there. So unless he gets much better with his hand technique in order to displace guys, how much more valuable is he going to be than, say, a Steven Tuitt for the Steelers, who, I mean, he has his spot in the NFL, but is that really a round one difference maker on the interior defensive line?
Yeah, we got to see it this year. Obviously, it's harder when Quinnen Williams is getting to the quarterback before you are every single snap last year. Yeah. In the tape that this is based off of, right? But I think there might be more to it there, and he reminds me more of a DeForest Buckner than a Tuitt. Who, there were concerns about Buckner's true, first step quickness and ability to get in the backfield, and somehow he's managed. Now, I don't think he's quite at that same level athletically, but I think we're within the same ballpark, and he could have a similar impact. Maybe more of a poor man's Buckner, but I still think that's that's closer to a top 20, even top 30 prospect if we want to be conservative, than it is, a top 50. And a guy who could be very interesting for the Broncos, especially if he is around, closer to 50th pick than top 20. He could come in. He could come in handy.
And the guy I want to ask you about in this list as it pertains to the Broncos, obviously, and all the listeners probably know by now, I have been on that wide receiver round one train for a bit. And somebody who I enjoy a fair amount, but I just don't love, is Taylor Wallace from Oklahoma State. A lot of numbers there, pretty good off the line of scrimmage, but I'm not sure what he offers as far as the short to intermediate passing game as well as yak ability. So what do you see there for Wallace? Does he break your top 5? I mean, it's a very stacked wide receiver class. He's not even in Dane Brugler's top 5 despite being ranked 47 here.
Yeah, definitely doesn't break my top 5 receivers, and that's a testament to this receiver class simply because it is so stacked. Though I am higher on him than Brugler is. Brugler?
Yeah, Dane Brugler.
One of those names that I've seen a gajillion times in writing and have never really mentioned, had to talk about. So, yeah, he's 31st for me. Obviously, haven't adjusted since watching college football yesterday. Your points are well taken. The yak ability is concerning for sure. Contested catch stuff, I'd like to see more. And yet I think the guy just gets open, and you can do a lot with him. Would fit well in a system like the Steelers, like just about any wide receiver. And I'm intrigued to see what he can do this year. I think we'd both be a little disappointed if that's the wide receiver the Broncos ended up having to settle on. But there's a lot to like just because the guy puts up numbers, and I think he's still kind of just scratching the surface. It'll be fun to watch him in Big 12 play this year.
You are 100% correct. He's fun, and a normal class, I can see him breaking that top 5, but he looks more like a mid-second to mid-third type of player to me right now, just because I feel like he does well, but it's not diverse enough, if that makes sense. And it's not at a dominant enough rate to like a DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf only does one thing, really, but he does it at an elite level. And I don't know if I see that from Wallace.
Right. It all gets back to the traits discussion that I've had a million times. It's so you think we're both too high on it. You're probably the lowest of the 3 here.
I think I don't have a formal big board right now.
Sure.
But he's closer to my wide receiver 10 than he is my wide receiver 5. There's a lot of wide receivers I really like in this class.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
obviously, we'll get to some here coming up. And one coming up right here. First, though, 44th overall, cornerback from UCLA, who I'll admit I have not seen much of. 5'10", 196 pounds, is short but thick. Darnay Holmes. So maybe that's one year out there in Pac-12 country. You probably have a little bit better idea with him. Says he gave Kyler Murray a hard time last year. 43, Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver from Michigan. 42, Ezra Cleveland, offensive tackle from Boise State, who some think might move into guard, but that's a player to watch there up for a lot of Broncos country. And congratulations, you guys, on that comeback at Tallahassee. Oh my God, what a game. God, the college football's back. Love it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Paulson Adebo, 41, which is lower than what I've seen some other draft analysts. But I like Paulson Adebo, maybe more on a cover 3 scheme, but 6'1", 188 pounds, cornerback from Stanford. And then back to Stanford, Walker Little, offensive tackle, 6'6", 314 pounds. I believe he was the number 1 recruit in the country his year. Definitely very highly rated. But some people think he may lack the feet to stick at the edge, might need to move inside. Although he might have suffered a serious injury yesterday. I'm not sure I saw him on the field, on the ground, watching Northwestern Stanford yesterday. So that's of note for both Walker Little and, unfortunately, Alaric Jackson. Both guys suffered injuries yesterday, so worth noting, but they're in the top 50 here.
Yeah, brutal day for Stanford with him. I still haven't seen what the deal is with him and KJ Costello going down. I mean, they almost blew it against Northwestern. That was truly brutal.
Yeah. Too bad for me being a Big Ten guy, although not the worst. Seeing Purdue kind of choked it there. I don't know if you saw the end of that Purdue game. That was insane as well. So, man, great. It's great college football's back. But I heard it seemed like you had to take there on Paulson Adebo.
Yeah, I'm really high on Adebo. I think he's right there as one of the top 3 cornerbacks in the class. The other 2 I won't spoil right now, but they're heavy in SEC countries for programs that have produced top-end cornerbacks time and time again throughout the years. I think your point on him being better suited for a cover 3 is great. That's kind of the one question mark on him is, is he an elite turn and run guy? No, he's not. So yeah, putting him out on an island against the best of the best in the world would be a concern. But I think this is a kid who could be a high-end cornerback for many, many years. And just, the stuff that he does, maybe he's lacking that elite trait since we talked about this with Till and Wallace, but the stuff that he does so well. And he's just going to be a thorn in the spine of any wideout that he has to, that he's covering. The ball skills are tremendous.
I would say that's an elite trait. You were talking about him having an elite trait. It's got to be ball skills.
Fair. Yeah. And I mean, physicality is right there too. You gotta love him in a press look. You gotta trust him. Schemes like the Broncos that are really going to count on those corners to do a fine job of tackling out on the edge. He's not going to let you down, and he was just a major standout for me watching Stanford last season. Watching him more, I came to the conclusion, not an elite turn and run guy, but lots to like here. Holmes, I've seen people a lot higher on him than he's ranked here. He's 39th for me, so just barely higher. But we're splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
Lots to like. Yeah, he looked good against Kyler Murray. That was what Kyler's second start at Oklahoma. Yeah. So I mean, it definitely got better as time passed, and that was kind of a brutal game in general for UCLA. I'd like to see how he played against Cincinnati in that loss. I haven't been able to go back and study that yet. There's plenty to like with him, though. The size is concerning.
I'm done with small corners. I'm not done, but if you're, you signed Bryce Callahan for that big chunk, and you had him good length there, but I don't know. I kind of want the Justin Hollins version of a cornerback with so much length and fluidity that you can just plop them in there in that cover 2, half field kind of cover 2, cover 4. And, just because the length is so good, they can be great because the pass rush is getting home.
Well, and Holmes is a tricky one because I feel like the tools are enticing. There's still some deficiencies. I still am not sure. Is he physical enough in press? And maybe sometimes he is physical, but sometimes to a fault. Is he an elite turn and run guy? I have my questions. Yeah. His ball skills are really good. But is he great downhill as kind of that ball hawk in a cover 2 type scheme? So I still need to kind of peg him and see where do I like him best.
Yeah. And any thoughts on the 2 offensive linemen here? Being a Denver Broncos podcast, offensive line is going to be something I feel like we talk about until we don't anymore. So Ezra Cleveland and Walker Little, do you agree with Dane Brugler's assessment here and to some of the league assessment that both of these guys might actually end up kicked in to guard because they lack the foot speed that teams want for guarding the edge?
I'm not going to BS you here. Ezra's one of the guys. He's actually the one guy that's not in my top 60 that we've said so far. So we're actually pretty lined up. And so I defer to you on that.
Okay.
I want to watch some more Boise. I want to watch what he did against FSU to start the season. Walker Little, I completely agree. I don't get the people that are ranking Walker Little as a top 20 guy.
I think it's more about his recruiting profile.
It's his recruiting, right. It's that recruiting pedigree and the fact that Stanford has produced great O-linemen in the past. If we look back, a lot of those guys have probably underachieved as pros. Though, of course, that's no reason to be down on Walker Little. The reason to be down is, as you were saying, I don't think the feet are great. He doesn't amaze me in pass pro. And then when I watch him in the run game, I don't feel like he's that true, nasty mauler. So yeah, what are you? What do I pound the table for Walker Little? Then again, though, the stuff that he checks off a lot of boxes. So he's still going to be a top 50 type prospect right now, depending on what happened with this injury. But yeah, he's not a top offensive tackle in the class for me.
Alrighty. Awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear we're kind of on the same page. I think, honestly, probably guard. That's probably what we'll see, but, you never know. Moving forward now, the next 5 guys. Number 39, Xavier McKinney, safety from Alabama. Mm-hmm. Number 38, Lucas Niang, offensive tackle from TCU.
Yeah.
Number 37, Ashton Davis, safety from California, who's walked on to Cal after getting a scholarship in track, supposedly a freak athlete.
Mm-hmm.
36, Jake Fromm, quarterback from Georgia. And 35, Lloyd Cushenberry, offensive center from LSU, who I remember struggled a bit against Quinnen Williams last year in that game, but a pretty solid player. I remember seeing some flashes with him. So a little bit of a SEC and Pac-12 vibe here on this list here. Any of these guys stand out for you? Xavier McKinney, or again, more offensive linemen?
I like that. I mean, I've seen more people around the draft world be higher on McKinney, and from this is where I have him as well. I'm maybe a little lower on McKinney. I just, and here's the thing. I'm starting to learn that with safeties, we can get so enticed by the tools, and the toolsy guys don't necessarily work out. It's more the high IQ guys that work out. Just look at who got paid this past free agency. It's a lot of low drafted guys who in the NFL were able to become highly paid safeties because they do have that IQ. They do have the smarts. So maybe I need to go back and watch McKinney under that lens. But at the same time, though, I'm not super intrigued by what he does. Though I know Bama's going to rely on him heavily, and I'll be interested to study him more against the top guys that he faces and really get a feel for that range and coverage, which it doesn't, there aren't like super wow plays, Malik Hooker style, where it's like, oh my God, how did he cover 3/4 of the field on that one play? He's also, he's always in his spots. He's in the right place, but is he super physical? Is he a guy that's going to really punish you coming downhill or playing closer to the box? I don't know. And we're all putting Fromm in this spot. Honestly, at the end of the day, I don't think Fromm will even be this high. Frankly, I would put money on the fact that Fromm won't even declare, because as the NFL actually starts to get a look on him, they'll realize he's nothing more than an Andy Dalton type. So nothing to get too intrigued about there. So I agree with that stuff. Niang, meh. Tools are enticing. Yeah.
Big boy. 6'6", 340 pounds.
And that's another thing where maybe we're learning, just like I was saying with the safeties, where we need to evaluate IQ above all else. Sometimes we get too caught up in athleticism with offensive tackles, and we need to remember that length is something that can help you overcome lack of athleticism more often than not. And that's a huge advantage that Niang has. I need to watch more of this LSU offensive line and offense in general. So on the center, I defer to you.
Yeah, he's got flashes. I remember a few times he will play past the whistle, not to the whistle, but past it, which can be a little bit bad.
Yeah.
And he'll be, so aggressive that he'll miss his assignment on the second level. Doesn't always play in control arriving there, but he's got a lot of tools. So an exciting player. Curious to see what he does in his junior season. Mm-hmm. Moving on now, we got another offensive lineman. Hey, guys, if you're hearing a lot of offensive linemen, bless you. This is something I know people have been upset about. It looks like we might have a solid offensive line class coming, but again, we got a full season to go, so we will see. 34 overall, Liam Eichenberg, offensive tackle from Notre Dame, 6'5", 311 pounds. There's some promising traits there. Darrell Taylor, edge from Tennessee, 6'3", 260 pounds. Travis Etienne, running back from Clemson, number 32, 5'9", 212 pounds, though I'm guessing he might actually be bigger than that now based on what I saw when they played Georgia Tech. He looked swollen, man, absolutely jacked.
Yep.
31, Eno Benjamin, running back from Arizona State.
Wow.
He this one upsets me because Eno Benjamin was committed to Iowa and then flipped, so I just pretend he doesn't exist. And number 30 overall, one of my favorite players in this upcoming class, Henry Ruggs, wide receiver from Alabama. So I think it's pretty safe to say, barring something catastrophic happening, the Broncos probably aren't looking to use a top 50 pick on running back. So it does look like a better running back class at the top this year. I mean, unless, I really like ETN. Jonathan Taylor looks pretty good. If he can add that passing game, which he showed against USF, that's a big part of his game. I'm really hammering the drum that is running backs don't matter. Running backs do matter, but running backs that can provide in the pass game as much as the run game really do matter. So that's, for the Philip Lindsay truthers out there, he's got to catch the ball. He's got to show as a receiver to really be valuable in the scope of the NFL. Still valuable to the Broncos, but I'm talking long-term value. So running back, probably not something the Broncos are going to be looking at early, given what they've done, what they have. You never know, but probably not. However, on this list, I guess the two really that stand out would be Liam Eichenberg and Henry Ruggs, who is one of my favorite wide receivers. I'm curious to see him. He's at 30. I know some wide receiver people have him in the top 10 just because he's supposed to run sub 4.25 speed, which is insane, with pretty good contested catchability and decent size for a guy with that kind of speed.
Yeah. I mean, the package you just described for Ruggs should... I needed to take a towel to wipe the drool off my mouth because, I'm enticed by those tools, firmly in my top 20. In fact, I have 16th overall, had to put Dylan Moses just under him as the injury came in. That's where I've settled on Dylan Moses for now. I'm sure that fall will continue, so you can allow for that little side tangent. I'm surprised ETN is that low. I'm surprised Benjamin is that high. Again, we don't want to talk about running backs too much. I think this running back class is pretty special, though. We talk so much about the quarterbacks and wide receivers with this year. The running back class, though, you've got some pretty special talents. And ETN, to me, is one of those guys. Eisenberg, really intrigued by him. Yeah. Really intrigued by that Notre Dame offense in general. They've produced quality offensive linemen, at least guys who've gone pretty high.
Their offensive line coach is gone, though.
That's concerning.
He's with the Bears now, I think.
He is playing left tackle this year, right?
Okay. Yes, he is. Yep.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I mean, he's a guy who's on a high-powered offense, even though there's been some turnover there. So he promises to do some big things. I like that he has him ahead of Walker Little. So, yeah.
Tools, trait-based scouting, people. That's what we're here for. If you got stats, toss them out the window.
Well, especially a year out. You might as well gamble on the tools and then let the tape settle you in there. So, yeah.
Come down. What a guy can be, the potential. That's summer-based scouting.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So we're moving on now. Number 29 overall, C.J. Henderson, cornerback from Florida, who, moves smooth, good click and close. Dude wants nothing to do with tackling, so miss me with that high, especially with Broncos scheme. You got to tackle. Number 28 and over number 30, Henry Ruggs. I just got to say, because this is my guy. I feel like I'm higher on him than almost anybody. Jalen Reagor, wide receiver from TCU. You're talking about, you need to mail me the towel from Colorado to Iowa, because the matchup of TCU versus Purdue coming up in 2 weeks. Oh my God, I'm hot thinking about it. Rondale Moore and Jalen Reagor. I'm seriously not going to be able to sit the whole game. It's going to be... my heart. I'm getting palpitations thinking about it. So we'll come back to Reagor here. Bryce Hall, cornerback from Virginia, who would have been my cornerback one had he decided to come out last year. Really, just an intriguing player. Oh, I really like Bryce Hall. The size, the length, the movement skills, the mirror ability, the ball skills. I mean, it's all high there. He knocks. I know that a lot of the analytics people, they have pass breakup stats, interception stats, as well as the tape people are married and being very high on Bryce Hall. And also I was lower on last year's class at the top. So I really like Bryce Hall. 26, Jared Pinkney, tight end from Vanderbilt. Broncos just spent a first-round pick on a tight end, and also Pinkney is not from a Big Ten school, so you can just cross him out, Bronco fans. Maybe there's the tight end from Purdue, whose name's escaped me right now, maybe the Broncos will double down. They haven't taken one from Purdue yet, so they got to, collect that bingo card.
That's right.
Get all of them.
Yeah.
And then
free sandwich next time there.
Yep, exactly. You got to get that punch card.
In the Midwest. Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool.
And then 25 is T. Higgins. Wide receiver Clemson, if you guys do not know. Big wide receiver. I'm not as high on him as I am the likes. He had a great catch against Georgia Tech, big guy, but I'm not sure how he's kind of potentially a less strong but more vertically explosive Courtland Sutton as far as like what's he doing after the catch, what's he doing in the short and intermediate areas. Right now he's a jump ball guy on those vertical routes. How much can he separate, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I like Higgins a lot, but as far as the Broncos go, I think he overlaps Sutton as much as anybody in this class for the top wide receivers. So I'm not really considering Higgins super high as a Bronco. But the rest of these guys, I mean, I like Steven Henderson, won't tackle. Really love Jalen Reagor. I really love Jalen Reagor. And Bryce Hall. So Jalen Reagor, I mean, he'll probably end up in my top 15. I guess I'll go on a little bit about Reagor since I have the platform and I'm saying how much I like him.
Yeah.
He's not as fast as Ruggs. He's not as big as Ruggs. But this kid is built, which is a surprise for a guy coming out at this level, especially a Big 12 program. No offense. You don't see the physicality that you would in the Big 10 or the SEC.
Sure.
5'10", 200 pounds. A track star as far as a runner and a leaper, so he has that lower body explosiveness. It's not just about the speed, it's the explosiveness in the lower body. And as much as I love Ruggs' straight line, and as fast as he is, he doesn't know how to really throttle down. And sometimes when he's moving, I feel like he's a bit stiff. He's stiff, a bit linear, where Reagor is like water out there. He is so smooth in flipping his hips. He can change direction, and he can threaten you over the middle, after a screen, deep, outside the numbers, from the slot. I do have questions about his ability to get off press. You're not really getting pressed at the Big 12, and when you run 4.3 speed like Reagor does, typically Big 12 teams are not going to press you, so that's a question. He might have to start off in slot because of that, but given his frame, I think he can do it. And then he also has the ability that he's not just a guy who can threaten vertically, which the Broncos need in this offense, but he's also a guy who can do yak stuff, which the Broncos also need in this offense. So I really like Reagor. I think he's a mini Emmanuel Sanders. He really reminds me of a young Emmanuel Sanders just because of that explosiveness, maybe even a little bit faster than Sanders. Not as good of a contested ball guy. I want to see a little bit more of that, just anger when he goes up for it. Yeah. But, man, I'm a huge fan. I think Pro Football Focus has him in the top 10. I'm somewhere in between there. So, Jalen Reagor, one of my guys.
Yeah, and the leaping ability might be better than Emmanuel needs to develop as a route runner, but I think just the pure athleticism, obviously 10 years younger, right? Yeah. But the pure athleticism right now is going to play up and be better than Sanders. Yeah, he's in my top 15. I like T. Higgins. I think I like T. Higgins more than you, though the points on the Broncos are well taken. I like T. Higgins more than most. I think we get in our heads a little too much about the separation and all that. The guy can just play and ball out. Like size you can't teach, contested ball skills for days. And yet I could not justify having Ruggs or Reagor behind T. Higgins as much as I'm high on Higgins. So that surprises me a bit.
Higgins is my wide receiver 6.
Fair. You talk for a second and I'll count him up.
Okay, he's probably, based on what you just said, he's your wide receiver 6. I have both Reagor and Ruggs above him. Reagor, for the Broncos specifically, I have Reagor 3 and Ruggs 4.
Oh, yeah, he's 6. Yep.
Perfect. Yep, I figured there's an elite 5 in this class, in my opinion.
There is, absolutely. Yep.
And I think all 5 of those guys will go first round. So we'll get to those guys soon. We haven't even, we touched on 2 of them, Reagor and Ruggs, but because of the Broncos needing that speed element and Manuel Sanders replacement, I do Broncos specific big boards, so those guys get a little bit of push on that end.
Right.
So
and Henderson, I'm with you. This is the tier where we were talking about Henderson, right? I got so caught up in the wide receiver talk. Yeah, mixed bag against Miami even. Started off really slow and then kind of locked down Jeff Thomas, another of these speedsters in the class, though not in that elite 5, if you ask me. Did a nice job on a few contested balls down in the end zone, knocking those out. I can see the appeal for Henderson. I can also see how turns you
gotta tackle.
Off. Yeah, you got to tackle. And I mean, just in general, physicality, I think we get too caught up in the tackling, but I want to see how you mix it up in press, how you handle, contested ball stuff, just being physical in general. There's a lot of areas in which a DB can be physical beyond just tackling, and that in general is a concern for Henderson, though he does flash some ability, on contested balls and what have you, like I talked about in that Miami game that happened in week 0. But still, I'm not I'm not super high. He's not one of my top 3 corners. Hall isn't either, though. I need to just dig in a little more on Hall. I'm intrigued that you're this high on him and that he checks off so many boxes. The tape I've studied, something's missing. He's not getting me off my chair enough to be a top 20 guy or a top 3 corner for me so far.
He's number 3 for me.
Okay.
And I have Paulson Adebo, cornerback 4, just because I feel like he's more scheme dependent.
Yep, fair.
So that's the big thing for me. And obviously, a lot of this will change. My number 1 corner is Christian Fulton. Number 2 is Okwara, who I'm just going for the traits on that one, man. His click. We'll get to those guys. They're coming up.
Yeah. Okay.
So tune in next week to hear the rest of the interview with Andre Simone of BSN Denver, covering some of the top prospects in the 2020 NFL draft class. So, all right, that's going to wrap up today's episode of the Building the Broncos podcast, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. You can follow us. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at milehighhuddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl and Andre, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.